My name is Leise Winny, and I've seen a few things in my life. I've been through some stuff, but I've had the pleasure of having an amazing family. I've had a chance to do some impactful work, and I've met some really great people. But one thing that little Leise didn't have in her life was her bio dad. Now that I'm looking back as an adult, I wonder how his presence could have made a difference in my life, as my daughters will have the pleasure of having their dad in their home. And we will look at in this special how dads impact children, how it will impact being a dad on their own personal view of themselves and the community. So let's talk about how dads can do it better. Dads are our first look at what a real life superhero looks like. They are truly Wakanda. We see them provide, they patch holes, they fix ceilings, and they kill spiders, and they're also our protectors. Our dads mold the way that we think and feel about ourselves. We've seen a big shift over the last 30 years in how we view dads. When I was coming up, dads were almost always seen as these stoic people who very seldomly had any of the dealings with the emotional teaching of children. He might have threw a ball in the yard to his sons, but very rarely had any direct lessons to the daughters. But we had a major shift happen over the last 50 so years in television, where we changed the way we view dads. In the 80s, my time, the 80s babies know that we do it best. TV dads from the 80s and 90s evolved from these very simple characters, usually just the provider, and evolved into these more complex, gentle, and even emotional beings. This shift from provider to caregiver is seen in societal norms, but I believe that we've seen this shift, and that is the reason why millennials and Generation Z look at daddying differently.
As a dad, we should be there, and that's our main job. And I think the only thing that's changed is to tell our children how to act in certain situations. That's changed. Because I remember when my daughter was born, Tanika, who's a millennial, and Brianna, they're both millennials. I remember when I come up with them, I didn't have to have this conversation with them as far as, this is how you act when you deal with cops, or this is how you act when you deal with people that don't like you because of your skin color. This is how you act. I never had to have a conversation. Now with my 3-year-old that I have now, Terry Jr., and then Javante and Zariah, who's in the house with me, who are 9 and 10, I have to have a conversation with them now. I have to say, you have to act this way. You have to put your hands on the steering wheel. You have to yes or no, so you have to, obey. Outside of that, I think the only difference is the fact that I have to have certain conversations now that I didn't have to, 25, 30 years ago.
A lot. I'm not gonna say a lot, but I've seen a lot of people that didn't have that fathers in their life, or I didn't see no around. Now I actually see everybody with their kids. I even see people even going to court fighting for their kids to get more time with their baby mothers and stuff. But the role really hadn't changed. I mean, the father still got the same role.
But there have been a lot of things in place to dismantle the family structure. For example, you have queens that may have a household in a particular environment where their rent is based on them not marrying their significant other. That's an example. So has the role of dad changed? No, I don't believe it has changed. It's just more barriers in the way to be in that role of dad.
Dads are the second half of our genomes. They help give us what we need so mom can bring us into this world. But studies have shown that a new baby or gaining a kid can weigh heavily on dads. According to parents.com, dads have even been seen crying, clenching teeth, and even fainting before, during, and after delivery. Getting acclimated can be very stressful for new dads, despite what we may think. Susan Fox, a pediatric therapist and author of Rookie Dads, said that dads struggle with getting involved because they can often feel like just a sperm donor. Many dads don't know how exactly to get started, but each dad has different reactions to that rookie stage.
That was a really hard day for me because I was 16 years old. No, I was 15 actually. I was in 9th grade, and I got that phone call, and it changed my life. It really did, because I had no idea what I was doing, what I was doing. How did I make a baby at 15? I was, naive, but that was a really hard day. It really was just really a hard day. But I'm thankful for it. But it was really tough. The day I found out that I was having my first kid, that was rough.
The first time I had a child, and she told me she was pregnant, I was excited. I was happy. I was nervous. I felt like my heart stopped beating for a moment, because I'm like, wow, a kid.
All my life I've always been a mentor, so I just kind of rolled right into it. Fell in love with my wife, or at the time my girlfriend, and stepped up to what needed to be. We complete each other. It's been 12 years, 13 years now, 9 years married.
No one can prepare you for parenthood, and you go in completely blind. Dads face the same fears as moms, but get even less information about what to do.
No manual attached. I figured as a kid, I would, but I wish I would have waited, to have my first child. But things happen. It would have been helpful to know that it takes time. It would have been helpful to know that you have to practice a lot of patience. There's a lot of things, that it takes time to do. I wish I knew how to be a dad. I wish I knew how to be a man. But I started this game so young. I didn't have a chance to kind of catch up. But
don't try to do it by yourself. Teamwork makes the dream work. Call on anyone in your circle that's done it before. Call on people who have experienced it and gone through the whole scenario at all ages. You need different parental mentors, different couple mentors if you're still with your significant other.
The topic of men covering feelings up is big. When it comes to stress about money, with many dads still being the predominant provider, and in some cases the sole provider, many can feel overwhelmed by the burden of fatherhood. Rachel Moss from the Huffington Post wrote an article which shows that men are twice as likely to feel financial burden in relationships than women, with 31% of men feeling they should be responsible or more responsible for the finances than their partners. Just 14% of women feel the same way. We've seen a rise, though, of dads who are staying at home, with more dads increasing staying at home since 2007. It reached an all-time high around 20.2% last year. This fallacy burden was best described by Chris Rock. He said, "If the kid can't read, that's mama's fault. Now, if the kid can't read because there's no lights on in the house, that's dad's fault." This burden gets more lonely when the appreciation for dad is lackluster or even demoted to just the big piece of chicken. That's all dad gets, but he feels like he's holding the bag, and most dads feel alone when it comes to the stresses and burdens of certain parts of fatherhood.
A kid, not sometimes, but when you do have a kid, sometimes you put certain things in the back seat. Like, you want to make sure your kid had a roof over their head. You want to make sure they got clothes, food. Chelton.
Because I remember at 15 when I first found out, before I found out that she was pregnant, I was just this little giddy kid doing what I wanted to do. And no responsibility for anything. Didn't know what a dollar meant. You know, just like any other man in this man was probably going to say. But once she came, and I had to get a job, and then I had to divvy money out right because the baby needed diapers. Baby needed diapers and formula and bibs and clothes and all that jazz. So I had to learn how to budget myself and how to make that end meet. Even though, you know, my first child, her parents, they were like, "We don't need nothing you got," you know. And they took care of her. You know what I'm saying? But it was still like I still want to do my part. So yeah, it changes you. You have no choice, because either you're going to change on your own. I'm gonna be honest with you real quick. I'm from North Carolina, you know, right? So child support laws are a little bit more strenuous there than they are anywhere else. So my thing was, at the time I was going through it, was I either can do this voluntarily, or I let the state do it, and I can stay in court every other week, and I can go to jail. I mean, that's kind of how it was, but.
Society has made it feel like the contributions into a child's life from a dad is merely financial, and that's false. Dads are more than a human ATM. They provide amazing value into a child's life, such as SSA Associate Professor Waldo Johnson Jr. He study titled Positive Impact of African American Dads. There was a limited extent, he said, to the positive impact of fathers and their roles in the development of a child's life, because most of the data that they were collecting in these studies beforehand were from the mothers of the absent children and not from the children themselves. There has been this narrative that dads can only contribute to the financial aspect of a child's life, but he said this is false. Professor Johnson also found that this narrative effectively discouraged men in poor communities from being officially present in the home out of fear of jeopardizing the government resources available to the needy mothers.
Every kid need a father figure. Especially I feel like a father figure it's like you need both in your life.
Because the man that raised me wasn't my biological dad. He was my step, and he one of the things that he taught me when I found out that when she was pregnant, my first child, was, you know, you have to be strong no matter how crazy it looks. You have to be that protector no matter how funky it looks to you. And I had to practice some level of strength. But because I was so young and I did not have the tools to be the man that I needed to be, I ran off, or I wasn't there for my daughter for the better part of the first 14, 15 years of her life. I wasn't, you know.
My father and mother are still married. They just celebrated 39 years together in marriage. And my father was always in the household. He was a second generation. I'm a third generation entrepreneur. My grandfather owned the Sphinx Club in Baltimore, Maryland on Pennsylvania Avenue, was a national treasure, probably an international treasure. And what I learned was that priorities are important. I remember being in single digits. I had to be 8 or 9, and my father was working with my grandfather. He was always out, and I remember stopping him, pulling him by his coattails, like, don't go to work today. And immediately he made a couple phone calls, and he stayed with his son, and that was, and 30 years later, I still remember that like it was yesterday. I think that having a father in the household teaches you things whether you want that taught or not. Meaning, my father led by example, so I watched him. He never put hands on my mother. So when I grew up, I knew that was something I would never do. I would never put hands on a woman. The things that leadership is something that you learn by doing, but you also learn by watching. And so I think tremendous impact having my father in the household. It was amazing to be from Baltimore, west side of Baltimore, Emerson Village. So I grew up in a 2-parent household, which brings me love. I was raised in the church, which gives me the spirituality. Emerson Village is the heart of Baltimore, the street of Baltimore. So I got the urban, and then I went to college and got a couple degrees and got the education piece. And I think all of those things were just having the village.
Now, not having a male role model in your life doesn't necessarily mean that you will not be successful. But having a male role model in the child's life can definitely help them be a better parent. A 2004 study by the University of Michigan, spearheaded by Cleopatra Caldwell, chair of the Department of Health, had a group of several children. With the treatment group having a male figure in their life, they found that they had experienced a more tremendous success in the terms of the abilities of fathers to curb negative influences, such as peers, and engaged in more positive conversations around health. The comparison group also experienced some positive results, such as fathers reporting that they had curtailed some of the negative behaviors, such as smoking and drug use. The father-absent household, however, saw higher odds of being incarcerated and higher levels of behavioral problems in schools, and more likely to be suspended from school. Research by Princeton University sociology professor Sarah McLennan notes that father's absence increases antisocial behavior, such as drug use, and reduces a child's chance of employment. There's also evidence that fatherless children have lower self-esteem and a greater risk for mental illness, suicide, and increased risk of depression.
It is perceived in society that dads don't matter. We all know that dads matter. The statistics show it. When you have a father in the house, you're more likely to go finish school. If a father's not in the house, you're more likely not to drop out of school. The statistics speak for themselves. I think society has a way of putting those barriers in the way so it can create this illusion of the role of the father and how it's perceived that dads don't matter. And
Gotta be my dad. He taught me how to be a dad without actually telling me by this watching example.
How does a man without a dad become a better father? It doesn't have to be a biological dad, just a male figure in the child's life. Per the National Fatherhood Initiative, 1 out of every 3 children in America lives in a home without a bio dad. Whether he's a child's biological dad, stepdad, or another close male, it can help reduce boys' behavioral problems, provide a positive role model, and even help boost the child's academic outcomes. This is also the same for girls. An unknown author once wrote, "Daughters see their selves worth in their father's eyes." And this dates all the way back to the 1920s. The Huffington Post did an independent poll of female executives on what they attributed to their success. More than 95% of them stated they had a strong male figure in their formative years. So how do male figures impact?
And having him in my life, it had a twofold effect. And it's going to sound crazy, but when I found out that he was my stepdad and not my bio dad, it destroyed me. So I was mad at him for a long time. So that was hard. You know, that was one part of it. But even though I was mad at him, he had instilled in me so many things before that moment even happened to where I couldn't stay mad at him long, if that makes sense. So So my second part of that is what I had to embrace after I got done being mad. I had to embrace everything that he taught me, because everything that he taught me came up in a life history lesson, or having a baby, or first girlfriend, or first wife for that matter, or a whole bunch of things that happened. Everything that he uttered to me up until the age of 16 or 17, I had to recant it. I had to run it back in my brain, you know. And I'm thankful for him for doing that.
Always been involved in mentorship since grade school. Always giving back. To whom much is given, much is required. And I think one of the biggest things that needs to be transferred to our younger generation. There's nothing more precious in this world than your time.
But just because you didn't have a dad doesn't mean you will not be successful. Wisdom Powell, Associate Professor of Health and Behavior at the University of North Carolina Gilling School of Global Public Health, argues that fathers are very important and they play a critical role. But she says that we essentialize the notion of black fathers and also in turn pathologize black mothers. When we say that if fathers aren't there, then boys can't be healthy and whole, and she doesn't think it's that simple of a story. It's more about the child's guardian and how they feel and deal with that absence.
I think it was ever perceived that dads didn't matter. I think that mothers received a lot of the love because they're the mothers, and I kind of agree, because the mothers are the queens, you know.
Because our queens have become so strong with the things that they had to deal with, it's almost like who's protecting who. And so I urge my kings to rise and protect our queens, and let's work together to move our culture forward.
We all have a moment of WTF, especially in parenthood, where we just can't get it right. But when it comes to silly, dads have it. The consensus is out. Dads are more fun. A recent study showed that what we all knew. Moms are less fun because they are typically the intensive parent. Dads have less stringent rules and can live up to the silly. But we all have some funny, epic fails. Sometimes.
My daughters would tell you that I probably do, but I don't remember any of those.
So I got 3 daughters. Doing a ponytail. I was trying to see girls and females. They do their kid hair quick. They get pour that brush, comb it back, put a little oil grease on it, and wrap it in a ponytail. So one day I'm home and I'm like, come on girls, let's get ready. Come on kids, pretty much. We going out, get their clothes in. Their hair wasn't even done that day. Oh man, like no problem putting on a ponytail. Little girls try to put the grease on. Now try and do girl hair with a comb. Oh man, my daughter crying, talking about I'm brushing their hair too hard. Their hair was thinning. Trying to do a ponytail. It's the hardest thing ever. Even trying to get the little rubber band around. It really wasn't a ponytail, but it was a crazy moment. Especially when I got to where I was going. When you got your friends and stuff saying, your daddy must do your hair.
My biggest dad fail was assuming that I could walk my daughter into Morgan State University and get her engineering degree. Now I had the center of influence to put her in place to go onto the road, but my assumption was wrong because that's not what she wanted to do. And so my biggest dad fail, and kind of coincides with being a great listener, is don't make assumptions. Work together as a team. Communicate with your children. ask them their advice on how you can be a better dad.
Dads carry fear for their kids, just like moms. As a Black father, the rates of fear for your child raises higher. And with men less likely to seek mental health treatment, it can weigh heavier on them. Research shows that 10% of new dads experience parental postpartum, but almost very seldomly seek any type of treatment. Men tend to suffer in silence.
Be emotional. What I fear most. I fear for my daughters that they married the wrong guy. If I could be honest, the fear for my daughters that they married the wrong guy. I've seen how bad relationships can ruin people. I was the culprit in a lot of those that I did. But that's one of my biggest fears. My fear for my boys is that they have a bad interaction with the cops and I lose my son to something tragic. That's my biggest fear for them. For my daughters to marry the wrong guy and have to go through something. And then for my sons, my fear is that they don't have a bad interaction with the cops. Those are my fears.
Influences. The influences that are in this world that are not of your core values. And the biggest fear is that my kids will succumb victim to those shiny objects that look like value but are really nothing.
The same fear my mother and them had when I was growing up. Friends, picking the right people to hang around and be around. Didn't know as a kid, but hanging around the right people can make a bit different in your life.
Fears for dads can definitely weigh different on them. Dads are strong, just not unbreakable Teflon. There's a big misconception about what dads are.
The biggest misconception is that we know everything. We don't. I think the day that a man realizes how much he doesn't know will be the day that he's humble enough to learn what he needs to know. Let me say that again. The day a man realizes he doesn't know anything, because you have that, it's usually about 16 to about 28, where you think you know everything, and you miss things. When you're stubborn enough to think that you know everything, you miss certain key elements, key things that
we're not there. I think that there are more dads there than not. That's me though. Statistics may say something else, but I really believe that it's the biggest misconception that we're not there, we're not prevalent. There's some truth to it because I was that dad. I wasn't there, wasn't prevalent for the first part of her life. So I can get it. That's not really a misconception. That's actually a conception because but we have made strides as dads, black dads, to where we're not being there for our children. Another big misconception is that we can't cook. We can cook like macaroni and cheese like everybody else.
Dads is not nice. Dad is the mean guy. Dads is around to provide and give you an ass whooping. But nah, as getting older, dads is this human.
Most dads' perception of themselves changes once they have a kid. They tend to feel more giving, more sensitive, and more frugal. But this impact happens to different dads in different ways.
I would say my role model, I have a few role models, but in becoming a actual father, it was the ability to listen and not to talk down or talk at. That's the word I was looking for. Sometimes as parents, or adults, we seem to speak at our children, as opposed to communicating. It's not a one-way street. I learned so much from our young kings and queens, and I learned so much from our seasoned kings and queens. So I think the listening aspect is so important, and listening to understand.
A lot of things, what I learned, the next question was, what did I learn? I learned how to be patient. I learned how to be a better man. I learned how to put someone else in front of what I thought. I learned how to love.
Powerful thing. Something so simple, but yet so hard. The art of listening. Most people listen to respond. The wise person listens to understand. I think one of the biggest things I've gotten from a role model that helped me be a better father, stepfather, grandfather, husband is to be able to enjoy the listening part and listening to understand as opposed to responding. Sometimes when you listen to respond, you put people on the defensive.
Being patient. Like you said, especially with girls, they different. This from hanging around with like the fathers. They taught me to be careful with my words. They actually taught me to be more sensitive to people's feelings. Then growing up, I didn't really have. I was the youngest child, so I didn't really care about nobody's feeling but myself. They actually let you know a lot more different things. So being patient and actually listening more.
How do relationships fare when you become a parent?
I've always been judged. I've always been judged as a dad by, baby mama, parents. Why didn't you do this? Why didn't you do that? Why why weren't you there? And I will say this, and my oldest daughter, Taniqua, and her mother, and we have a relationship, and we're cool, we're friends, but it wasn't always that way, right? To be honest, it wasn't always that way, and we would bicker and fight back and forth. She would always critique me as a dad, and like, well, you wasn't there, so what you want me to do?
Definitely felt with my spouse, especially as grown up different.
Learning who you are can help you figure out how to parent and what impact you want to leave on your child.
I think it would be this here. They call this a smartphone, but depending on the type of content you look at on this device, it can be considered a dumb phone. So one of the lessons I would instill in my kids is that use tools wisely, because tools can be given, and people can say that knowledge is power, but I disagree with that. If I give you all the knowledge and you use it on absolutely nothing, what power is that? So I like to say applied knowledge is power. And with applied knowledge, you got to know how to use the tools properly. So with that lesson, it would be 1, use your time wisely. 2, use your resources wisely. Think of your goals. Utilize your dreams. If your goal doesn't make somebody say you're crazy, you're not dreaming big enough. So I think all 3 of those lessons combined would answer that last question?
I want them to understand that they can do anything that they want to do. I want them to know that they don't have to be a product of their surroundings. They don't have to be a statistic. They don't have to be, I tell my sons, this is what I tell my sons, and I mean this when I say it. I won't back down when I say it. I used to tell my sons now, the biggest fear of a white man is the fear of an educated black man. I said, you go and you get your education. Go.
I want to tell my kids, definitely work effort. Never get up. I want my kids to know that anything is possible. Just stay focused. Definitely don't be afraid to do research. Be open-minded. You can learn a lot from anybody.
But why do you love being a dad?
I love everything about all of my children, and I'll start with Taniqua because she's my oldest. I'll try not to get emotional when I talk about this, but what I love about Taniqua is that she has a great bounce back spirit like her dad. Brianna, who is my second oldest, I love Brianna. Same thing. I love her. I love her bounce back spirit. I love her smile. She's giving me 2 grandkids. Brianna went through a lot. I wasn't there for her either, and I was married to her mother. But we went through a lot. And again, the same way with Taniqua. She allowed me. She be at some years, but she still gave me the opportunity to be a part of her life. I have one other daughter. Her name is Kiana. She's another stepdaughter that I raised in my second marriage, out of Illinois. I love her. I love her resilience. Same thing. We had a tumultuous relationship, even though I was married to her mother for 14 years or 13 years. Now, you talk about Zariah, Javante, and TJ. Now, these are the 3 that I have that live in my house. Now, what I love about these 3, okay, not only, and I don't want to sound like I'm biased, but they live here with me, right? But Zariah and Javante, I love their humor. They are funny. TJ, who's 3, who is my autistic champion. I love him. He's right now nonverbal. But what I love about him is that he knows exactly how to love me. He shows me exactly how for me to love him. Even though he's nonverbal and he can't talk right now, I'm believing that he's gonna talk and he's gonna be just fine. He's a little delayed, but I'm believing that he's gonna talk.
I actually love about my kids because they actually bring me back to myself as a kid. As you get older, you just be busy working, moving, stuff like that. And sometimes you actually forget about your childhood, kind of. And every once in a while, they'll do something that bring you back when you start thinking about when you were little and stuff. So I guess they actually kind of keep me young.
Father too, and a grandfather too, and it's my honor.
That's it. The consensus is in. Dads are important. With more and more dads actually being single sole parents, we have to give dad their props too. So happy Father's Day to all the father figures out there. Whether you are a biological dad, whether you are a stepdad, whether you are an adoptive parent, whether you are an uncle, whether you're a neighbor, a teacher, male mentors matter. So we want to give you a big happy Father's Day. And it doesn't matter whatever your dad wants to do, whether it's just plain quiet, a T-bone steak, a new set of tools, flowers, balloons, or just a hug. Remember to say, Happy Father's Day. We love you. We thank you. And we appreciate you.
To share with you my thoughts on fatherhood. Happy Father's Day to all the fathers out there, stepfathers out there, mentors out there. If you mentored anyone, you're a father figure. We thank you, we thank you, and we thank you. Signing out. See y'all next time.